Title: The Awakening Path. Year: 120 million. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. A skinwalker of destiny had not always worn others' faces. Once he bore his own, until exile carved his identity into whispers and forced him to adapt literally. Now he changed his form to survive, to blend, to vanish. In the outland of Kranji, he was known only by rumor. The shadow that walked like memory, a ghost that left kindness instead of terror. But in truth he was searching for a place where he wouldn't need a mask. In the frozen basin of Nala's Reach, a settlement of ice whispers thrived in silence, communing through vibration and frost rune. They did not take kindly to outsiders, especially not those who could shift shape. He arrived during the moon thaw, and they met him with blades of song. Chapter 2. The ice whisper who first spared him was old not in years but in grief. Her name was Taro, and she had once buried a daughter who tried to speak words aloud. To the whispers, silence was sacred. Words caused fracture. But when the skinwalker sang not with voice, but gesture and mimicry, something stirred. He danced their grief back to them, reshaping his face to mirror their dead, their lost, their pain. They watched, they wept, they welcomed. Slowly, painfully, a new ritual emerged, one where difference wasn't erased but embraced. His shape-shifting became a rite of storytelling. Her ice carving turned from barrier to bridge, and for the first time in generations, two truths set aside one another without war. Chapter 3. When the blight came, an ancient hunger born of flame, and when the settlement braced to defend itself, but their way, refined in silence and secrecy, faltered against chaos. It was the skinwalker who led them, not by command, by becoming. He wore the beast shade to understand it. He mapped its patterns in gesture. He led it away by appearing as its mate, then vanishing into the ridge where it could not return. He returned changed, eyes dimmer, but soul brighter. Carol named him Ken, and together they taught the new generation to listen, to shift, to stay, because the path you avoid holds the version of you still waiting to awaken. And every community grows best not when it is pure, but when it is whole. Title: The Wind That Listens. Year: 119,935,897.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. The veiled seer had never seen her own reflection. Her veil wasn't just clothes, it was consequence. A sacred shroud passed from the last prophet who failed to stop a war. It obscured not just her features, but her fate. Those who saw her never saw her twice. Her truth wasn't in what she spoke. It was in what she refused to reveal. Below the cliffs of Maribrook, her village bent beneath the weight of drought, silence, and forgotten futures. The bone-lashed witness, a chronicler marked by scars of survival, petitioned her with the plea, "Tell us what comes next." She didn't speak. She handed him a compass carved from obsidian and breath. "When you name your direction," she said, "even the wind listens." Chapter 2. The villagers wanted miracles. The seer gave them choices. She told them to walk west, into the dustline. The elders called it madness. But the witness listened. He gathered those who had nothing to lose and led them into wind and grit. Along the way, many faltered, but he repeated her words like a mantra, a spell, a heartbeat. When they reached the ravine of whispers, they found not water, but echoes of those who had come before and failed. Bones. But bones arranged in circles, runes, maps. The seer had known, not just where to go, but how to endure. The witness called them together. "We do not bury the past," he said. "We build with it." Chapter 3. They raised a settlement not from stone, but from resilience, and stitched with stories. Wells dug with remembered names, props coaxed from cursed ground. They did not wait for prophecy. They became it. When the seer arrived moons later, they didn't ask her what came next. They showed her what already had, and she removed her veil, not for herself, for them. The wind shifted, and the valley bloomed, because resilience is not stubbornness. It's vision with scars. It's naming a direction when all you have is wind, and walking anyway, together. Title: The Illusion We Laughed Through. Year: 119,743,589.7. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. The thorn-cloaked guy was not a hero. He was a nuisance, a jester, a constant thorn in the robes of those who believed themselves wise. With a beard tangled in feathers and sarcasm sharp enough to slice steel, he wandered from town to town delivering hard truths with a wink and a fart joke. But beneath the buffoonery he watched, and what he saw in the city of Greyweight disturbed him deeply. Rows of citizens smiling through broken teeth, praising a system that worked only if you didn't ask for help. Truth he knew was needed, and truth he also knew was dangerous. Before it frees you, he said to his goat, truth will break the illusion you called home. Chapter 2. Enter the language shaper, an oracle who rewrote minds with metaphor, turning injustice into duty and struggle into purpose. She crafted slogans like armor and parables like chains. They met during a mandatory optimism parade. He juggled rotten apples and shouted, freedom is when your leash is made of gold. The language shaper blinked. You mock stability. I mock your idea of stability, he said, bowing, which smells like wet wool and denial. She tried to reframe his rebellion as eccentric performance art. He farted on a podium. The crowd laughed and paused, then thought. The illusion cracked. Chapter 3. He didn't overthrow anything. He never held a sword. But one by one, citizens began asking, why can't I rest when I'm tired? Why is asking for help seen as failure? Why do we punish the sick with silence? The language shaper's spells unraveled like bad punchlines, and as laughter echoed through once quiet squares, people found the courage to stop pretending they were okay. The thorn-cloaked guide left a note on the city gate. Your well-being is the revolution. Fiat, then vanished, because a healthy society isn't built on control. It's built on seeing each other fully and laughing through the illusion, right into something real. Title: Step Beyond Silence. Year: 119,615,384.4. Era: Love-Stone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Ghost General had led more campaigns than most histories could hold. His victories were mythologized, his failures erased. But after the Sky Breach War, he vanished, sacrificing a command seat on the orbital rings for obscurity. Now he lived planetside in a forgotten zone called Mirror Delta. Their machines grew restless, and something was rewriting time. He kept to himself, until the blade with the past arrived, the sentient weapon carrying echoes of every battle that had spilled blood in. Finn's beacon words. It hummed in memories. It sought him, because something worse than war was coming, and this time it required restraint, not conquest. Chapter 2. A fissure had opened in the chrono grid. Cities flickered between centuries. Empires rewound. Families unexisted. The blade showed him. Why me? The Ghost General asked. You've stepped back, it pulsed. Others haven't. He was hesitant, and remembered his mantra. You can't unlock your potential without losing your comfort. So he returned to the battle table, but not to command, to observe. He watched the timelines twist. The political pawns panic. Then he made a choice that no one else would. He severed the primary grid, let chaos breathe, then traced its pulse. Only then did he see the pattern. The war wasn't in space. It was in memory. Chapter 3. The key wasn't to fight the anomaly. It was to forgive it. He led a mission not to destroy, but to witness. They entered the chrono core and allowed it to show them everything they had tried to forget. Each soldier faced their worst decision and owned it. Only then did the rift close. The timelines were in it, the cost. They would remember everything, always, and they would teach it forward. The Ghost General refused his title once more. The blade went silent at peace, because sometimes true leadership is stepping back, letting uncertainty speak, and listening, because perspective is forged in pause, and the future bends not to force, but to clarity, named in stillness. Title: The Kindling of Masks. Year: 119,487,179.4. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Chrono Mender was born with the ability to stitch moments together, brief flashes of the past sewn into the eyes of the present. It was a rare gift, revered in the capital, feared in the provinces, but she lived in the village of Karesh Hollow, where such gifts were hidden behind polite smiles and hushed prayers. At 13, she wore her first mask. By 16, she had a dozen. One for her family, one for her peers, one for the priest who warned her that difference was dangerous. Only the lightning shepherd saw her real face. He had no mask, only a crooked grin, and stories sparked from stormlight. Kindness is the spark, he told her. It doesn't break walls. It invites you through them. Chapter 2. She watched him greet the outcast and feed the thief. He walked into conflict with soft hands and left people changed. When she asked him why, he said, "To live fully is to set fire to every mask you love." The words burned, so she tried it. She stopped apologizing for her questions. She stitched together a broken memory for an old widow who'd forgotten her child's name. She refused to dim her light for the comfort of others, and people stared, but they didn't turn away. Some even followed, because courage dressed as kindness is contagious. Chapter 3. When the storm came, the real one. Black and furious, everyone turned to the shepherd, but he was gone. They turned to her, and she stood unmasked in the village square, light pulsing from her palms, time threads dancing at her fingertips. She stitched their panic to their strength. She mended fear with shared memory, and when the skies cleared, she wasn't wearing anything but the truth. The masks had all burned, and from their ashes something real stood tall. Because kindness doesn't demand, it reveals, and to live fully is to offer that revelation, one act at a time, until no one needs a mask again. Title: The Boundaries of Fire. Year: 119,294,871.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. The plague of the possible haunted the Southern Isles. Not a sickness of flesh, but of ambition. It whispered to dreamers and lovers alike, promising them more if only they could hold tighter, push harder, demand deeper. Entire villages fractured, chasing what could be, forgetting what already was. The last guardian of the first flame tended the eternal pyre at the heart of Kalmar's temple. Her vow was simple: protect the origin fire, no matter the season, no matter the sorrow. He came to her through smoke-charred maps in hand, his eyes alight with paths not taken. He was a fire chaser. She was a fire keeper. In their love was a match both sacred and doomed. Chapter 2. He told her of mountains where love writes memory, rivers that erase regret. He wanted to take her to these places, believing they could perfect what they had. But she stayed at the flame. Fire doesn't move, she said. It teaches you to hold still. He didn't understand. Not then. He tried to convince her, begged, argued, until one night he crossed the fire's boundary with ink on his hands, drafting a future that didn't ask. The flame recoiled, and so did she. You tried to own my path, she whispered, and in doing so, you lost yours. He left before dawn, the temple colder than ever. Chapter 3. Years passed. He wandered far, burned bridges, lost names, and one night, on a distant cliff, he fell to his knees, not from pain, but understanding. He could not be everything. He should never have tried to be everything for her. Understanding one's limitations, he realized, was not failure. It was devotion in its truest form. He returned to Kalmar. The pyre still burned. So did her eyes. They said no apologies, only stood each beside the flame, facing their own side, together, yet separate, bound not by ownership, but by recognition. Because the greatest love doesn't erase boundaries, it honors them, and in that stillness, they burned brighter than any dream ever dared. Title: The Sacred Carving. Year: 119,230,769.1. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. The Beast Tamer was not born a hero. He was born with rage coiled like a second spine. His powers surged without control, and by 10 he had shattered the village gate. By 13 he had banished himself into the wilds beyond the Ember Line. There he found the forgotten librarian, an ancient being who catalogued more than books, regrets, confessions, apologies never spoken. You wish to tame beasts? The librarian asked, watching him wrestle with thunder boar. Tame myself, the boy growled. Then you must first forgive what you've become. He spat at the thought. But he returned the next day, and the next, because even rage grows tired of silence. Chapter 2. The librarian gave no answers, only reflections. He showed the tamer a vision. His father cursing the day of his birth, his mother clutching him through tremors, his younger self sobbing after crushing his brother's toy by accident and being told it was proof of danger. The boy wept, and in the weeping something softened. Forgiveness is not a pardon, said the librarian. It is a mirror unclouded. When the tamer left, he was not cured, but he was clear, and when the village cried for help, monsters rising from the cracks of the earth, he returned, not to prove he was good, but because he no longer feared who he'd been. Chapter 3. He calmed the fire serpent by naming his shame. He soothed the wind wraith by recalling the apology he never gave to the friend he lost. He embraced the shadow beast, who wore his face, and the people watched, stunned, not by power, but by presence, by a boy, now a man, who wielded pain as a balm instead of a blade. He never called himself a hero. He built a sanctuary, where young ones with too much fire came to learn how to forgive the flames, because the challenges that carve you deepest often shape your most sacred becoming, if you let them, and if you listen, even to yourself, especially then. Title: The Bloom and the Echo. Year: 118,974,358.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. The Bloom Walker never carried a sword. She carried seeds, pockets full of them, sleeves lined, boots hollowed, to walk from village to ruin. from outpost to cliffside, and where she planted, wildflowers burst like applause. But flowers weren't what made her feared. It was her ability to calm riots. Silence wore cries with a story and a stare. She spoke of echopaths, realities spun from the smallest choice. And when people laughed, she gestured to the scars on her cheek. This was from a peace never made. The seer of forgotten paths watched her work. He'd once followed the prophetic orders, but they'd exiled him for saying peace was a choice, not a prophecy. Now he walked beside her, and history began to blink. Chapter 2. Two tribes, Sultan and Dustborn, stood ready for war over a poisoned river. Each blamed the other. Each sharpened blame like blades. The Bloomwalker arrived with a shovel and silence. The seer followed, eyes closed, whispering the echoes of what might come. A child lost, a lineage broken, a drought that would last generations. She dug. Peace starts before the shouting, she said. She found the leak a rusted toxin pipe from neither tribe, and still they fought. So she planted. Flowers sprouted where arrows should have fallen, and she looked each elder in the eye. What you choose now to write echoes far beyond your lifetime. And she stepped back and waited. Chapter 3. The elders stood in silence. Then just one laid down his spear. That was all it took. The seer saw a new path carve into time. Years later, the valley between Sulcan and Dustborn became the blooming corridor, a haven for trade, stories, healing, not because of magic, because someone chose peace when war was easier. The Bloomwalker vanished soon after, as wanderers do. The seeds kept sprouting, and the seer kept guiding, because conflict resolution is not surrender. It's authorship. It's choosing what the echo will carry when the shouting stops, and the roots remember. Title: The Legend We Left Behind. Year: 118,974,350.7. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The name unspoken had once been a whisper used in rebel circles, then erased from scrolls, outlawed in temples, and feared in palaces. No one remembered where she was anymore, except the Hunter of Night. He remembered everything, catalogued each revolution, archived each betrayal. His mask never came off, his crossbow never missed, and he followed her through cities that no longer named her, carrying secrets heavier than his own life. She was on her final mission to infiltrate the Black Citadel, not to destroy it, but to recover a single name. Her own, the only copy left, slept in a vault beneath the throne room, and she could not do it alone. Chapter 2. Their plan was simple. Their fear was not. She had to trust him with her life. He had to trust that she wouldn't vanish again. They slipped into the citadel like fog, like ghosts, like old stories returning with nuts. He disarmed the sentries with sleep-proof darts. She picked locks with broken promises. In the vault, she found the scroll, her name, her deeds, her shame, and a line written by him. You are not healing, you are reassembling a legend from the bones of forgetting. She turned. He had followed her deeper than ordered, to see her, not as myth, but as woman. She unmasked first. Then he did. Chapter 3. They escaped together, but not clean. The citadel fell into unrest, shadows rising, secrets loosed. She could have run. He would have let her. But they stayed. Together, they shared the truth. Not the myth, not the glory. Just the pain, just the love. And when the people asked her name, she didn't speak it. She handed them the scroll, let them decide, because trust isn't built in silence. It's born in choosing to be seen, even when the world forgets you, especially when you forget yourself. And legends, they don't live in songs. They live in scars, held by someone else, who chooses to stay. Title: The Laugh That Listened. Year: 118,717,948.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. A trickster who remembers never told a joke the same way twice. He'd stroll into town squares with mismatched boots, a loop missing strings, and a grin that made nobles nervous. He was chaos in a patchwork cloak, but the kind that smelled like childhood, not destruction. In the village of Grindlethorn, grief hung heavy. Fires had consumed half the valley, and even the sun seemed too tired to rise early. When he arrived, people rolled their eyes, until he laughed, and then they cried, because his laughter echoed like something they'd forgotten, joy that hadn't yet apologized. The nearer scribe, a recluse who hadn't spoken in years, watched from behind her shutter, and wept, because the trickster was telling her story, without knowing it. Chapter 2. He found her that evening, tracing words onto glass with candle soot. You write silence beautifully, he said. She didn't answer. He sat anyway. played a chord, sang a song where everyone's name was a vegetable. She smirked. Let the ash speak, he whispered. What you lost was never who you truly were. That night, she gave him a journal filled with stories of people long gone told through what they left behind. Burned doors, melted clocks, a spoon cradle in mud. He turned them into satire, then into love songs, then into games the children played with each other. And somehow, grief began to giggle. Chapter 3. When the elders proposed rebuilding the town square as it was, the trickster told a tale of a pig who rebuilt its die exactly the same and kept falling into the same mud hole. They laughed, then fought, then changed the plan, with empathy stitched into architecture, with joy carved into door frames. The mere scribe began writing again, not on soot, but on scrolls passed from hand to hand. The trickster left soon after, but his laughter stayed, because empathy doesn't always weep. Sometimes it snorts, sometimes it sings, but always it listens, and it builds the society strong enough to laugh with, not at, never at. Title: The Vow That Walks. Year: 118,653,845.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. The Saboteur of Fate never asked to lead. She only ever wanted to break things that deserved to fall tyrannies, lies, masks. But when the Bloodstone Rebellion faltered in the West, its fractured survivors turned to her, not because she promised peace, but because she refused to lie. She carried no banner, only a box of bones wrapped in silk, a reminder of every command she'd regretted. They followed her through the dread marsh, where the sky wept silver, and the ground whispered truths better left buried. There they met the walking vow, a figure from myth, bound in chains of bone and oath. He offered no counsel, only judgment, and the test. Chapter 2. She accepted the vow's trial. They would pass together through the maw, a labyrinth of flesh and memory that stripped away all illusion. No weapons, no masks, no commands, just choices. The rebellion's remnants argued, begged her not to go, but she looked them each in the eye and said, "No worthy journey leaves you unchanged." The vow opened the gate. Inside, time faltered. Shadows peeled away, skin to reveal fear. At one point, she found herself faced with a copy of herself, cruel, charming, victorious through blood. She chose to leave that version behind. The vow watched silently until he wept. Chapter 3. At the Ma's heart, she was given a choice: inherit power with no oversight, or return as herself with no promise of success. She walked out with nothing but eyes brighter than when she entered. The walking vow knelt and offered his chains. She declined. "Keep them," she said. "Let them remind others of the cost." She returned to her people not as a symbol, as a servant. And when chaos surged again, they didn't look for someone to save them. They remembered her steadiness, her refusal, her truth. Because ethical leadership doesn't dazzle. It endures, and becomes the vow we all walk beside when we're brave enough to listen. Idol, the tradition that broke open. Year: 118,461,538.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy and Rise of the Zodiac Series, 2025. Chapter 1. In the kingdom of Dalmort, tradition was sacred and suffocating. Every trade had its ritual, every birth had its scroll, every death had its silence. The spirit of war was no longer a soldier, once a general, now a shadow. She wandered the country's roads, offering warnings to those who would not change. Her armor hung in ruins, her metals rusted by forgotten rains. The unmarked grave she tended lay beneath the oldest tree in Dalmort, where thinkers were buried without names to preserve order. One such thinker had been her brother, executed for proposing irrigation instead of sacred rain. False chance. Time, she whispered, bends to those who walk not ahead of it, but alongside eternal truth. And truth was stirring. Chapter 2. Ammon cracked Dalmort's fields. Priests chanted, elders fasted, crops withered. Then came the boy. He was neither noble nor sanctioned, just clever and desperate. He proposed a system of root, cooling troughs, and seed rotation, based on theories pulled from banned books buried near the unmarked grave. They laughed, they scorned, but the spirit of war listened, and she knelt beside the boy. Together they built a trial field outside the village. Rain came late, but when it did, the test plot bloomed. The elders claimed divine intervention. The boy smiled and said nothing, but the spirit of war carved a name on the grave that night. Chapter 3. Whispers spread. Young farmers visited. Old rules cracked like dry earth. Dalmort changed not with violence, but with daring truth. Tradition was not slain. It was composted, fed back into the soil to bloom anew. And when the spirit of war vanished again, all they found was a note on the tree. Honor what was, but never forget. Even roots must be replanted to grow deeper, because breaking tradition is not rebellion. It's remembering that truth walks not in chains, but in choice, and it waits beside those willing to walk forward with it, not behind it.